that's in this. And Colleen, I believe this is going to be recorded. Is that right, Emily?
She just said it, yeah.
Okay, very good. So Colleen, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you all for having me and coming. And when I was looking at this topic, the first thing I did was I thought, let me see what quotes there are out about joy. So I looked it up, and the first quote I found was from C.S. Lewis, and he says, "Joy is never in our power." And I thought, what a Debbie Downer. Debbie Downer. But it's true. It's like you can't force someone to make them be your friend, and you can't make yourself be something. But what you can do is you can lay the fertile soil and plant the seeds for developing joy. And so that's mostly what I'm going to talk about today, is how to get there. There was a gentleman who had experienced addiction, and he just couldn't shake it. And he tried to do one small thing. He thought, I'm just going to start running. And it turned into running marathons. And one of the things that came to him was that there comes a point in the marathon where it is not fun. He enjoyed running, but he took his hydration and he took his food, and it's just not fun. And he feels like he can't go on. And then he's like, okay, I can't finish this. That's all right. I'm going to take the next step. And he talks about how finding yourself at those points of resilience, where you take that next step and you push past it, and making that a habit, challenging yourself to do hard things, but not so hard that you get lost. And making that a practice really helps you to have that habit of resilience and joy and recovery from these things that we have no control over, the war, the environmental disaster that's upon us, and those types of things. And there is I just want to remind you at this point that not everything is going to work for everybody. These are things that I found that have worked for me, or that I've heard from other people have worked for them. So if there's something that doesn't work for you, just throw it out the window. For instance, I am never running a marathon. I'm only running to the nearest bakery as far as I'm running. But I challenge myself with other hard things. Like I have this thing for jigsaw puzzles that Adina and Kurt turned me on to, and I'll do hard ones. And in the beginning, I'll go like, oh, this is round. I'm never going to figure this out, but I'm just going to sort it into colors today. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to do this one little thing. And I just don't let myself get overwhelmed by the big picture. So that's another big piece of it, is just do one little thing, because that's the step that gets you there. Terry Pratchett had a quote, which is that joy is to fun what the deep sea is to a puddle. It's a feeling inside that can hardly be contained. So fun isn't joy, but it's a little bitty piece of joy. And fun, it turns out, is really, really important to getting us to that state where we can experience joy. There's Dr. Kelly Lambert, who's a behavioral neuroscientist who has done a lot of work, mostly with rats. And one of the things that really intrigued her was how much real estate we have devoted to our motor cortex, right? It's, a huge part of it, and it's central to our brain, and it's right next to our pleasure centers too, which is really interesting. So it's a way to access those pleasure centers. And so she wanted to figure out, does movement matter? Is part of our malaise and our difficulty because we're sitting in front of these screens and not getting up and doing anything, and because we're not experiencing pleasure. Mammals learn through fun. So she's done all these studies, largely on rats, but I find them quite compelling. One was that they did these studies on teaching them an exercise, and I didn't see the original research, so I don't know what it was they were trying to teach them to do. If it was running a maze or tapping a lever, I don't know how complex it was. But they found that if they just taught it to them. Okay, do this, do this, do this. It took 42 repetitions for them to learn that exercise. If they made it something fun that the rats were motivated to do, it took 3 repetitions. So even if it's not the most. Yeah, write me down for the fun. And she also is researching positive anticipation. And what she does is she takes what she calls trust fund rats. And apparently rats have a thing for Fruit Loops. They really, really like Fruit Loops. And the trust fund rats don't have to do anything. They just get Fruit Loops whenever they want. Their sunflower seeds are already shelled for them. They don't have to look to paw. They don't have to do anything. And then they have other rats that they have, what are they, I'm trying to get the term here, effort-based reward. But it's a fun thing. It's a positive stressor, much like that guy's marathon that he was running. And so they get only rewarded when they do things. And she made it so that it wasn't consistent. It was unexpected. So they got to have this positive, optimistic outlook. Oh, this, I don't know what's going on, but this is going to be fun. This is going to give me a reward. I'm going to see a difference, and what I do is going to make a difference. And she found that they developed bigger neocortexes, and that when they measured the stress hormones, they recovered a lot faster. And then she also had rats, poor things, where they were giving fear-based reinforcement. Oh, you turned wrong, you know, a little shock there for you. And their brains were small, and they lived in a state of constant stress. And when you're in this state of constant stress, your brain, I mean, cortisol and all those hormones are great for getting you through the moment. But when you have them long-term, it doesn't allow your body to recover. It doesn't allow those recovery mechanisms, and such as when you go to sleep and your brain cleans out the tangles and the plaques that are there. All that stuff gets inhibited. Your immune system gets inhibited. So we don't want to live in that constant state of stress and fear, which is what being continually focused on war and injustice in our boiling planet does to us, right? So we need to take breaks from that. The other thing that they found, and it wasn't from Dr. Lambert, but just other studies in general, is that when people did complex motor skills, and specifically they looked at skiing and dancing as the 2 most successful things. So sorry, Dina, those aren't on your list, are they? But
I danced all the time.
chair dancing.
When I wasn't in chair, I danced all
Yeah, but they found that those complex motor skills were the ones that helped people with depression just as much as the antidepressant did. So it's very linked. Your movement and your mood are very linked. And she's also been looking at rats in the wild. And what's interesting is there's, even though they're under negative stressors, they seem to have a faster recovery. They're not getting the shocks that her other rats were. So they were still getting a faster recovery and having a thicker neocortex than the trust fund rats, for instance, that were just sitting there getting their Fruit Loops without doing anything. One of the things that I had looked at for myself was I was doing some reading, and there's a book called How We Choose to Be Happy by Foster and Hicks. And one of the things that they did was that they tried to find objectively happy people and then figure out, what do they have in common? What is it that they're doing that makes them happy? And so they looked at things like, did their clergy think they were happy? Did their neighbors think they were happy? Did they think they were happy? Did a psychiatrist think they were happy? They tried to make it as objective as possible. And of course, that still has its limitations, but they found 9 things that these people did that tended to make them happy and live in a place of joy. And overwhelmingly, the most important part of that was their intention to be happy. So intention is a huge piece of this. if you have an intention to fix your problems, which is what a lot of us do, we do things in the negative, I'm not gonna do that, right? You get fewer problems, but you don't become happy or joyous. So you wanna have the focus on the positive, you wanna remember what matters to you. And so when you're planning on doing something, you wanna expend your energy on the things that you know that will bring you joy. So you wanna get clear on your big picture, and then every day ask yourself, what is one thing I'm gonna do today that's gonna bring me joy? Just one thing. And if you're having a bad day, it's okay. It might be, I'm gonna binge watch my guilty pleasure show, whatever it is. Mine happens to be HGTV, but so whatever that is, you know, that it's just, what do I need for this day at this time? A second big thing that they found was having a sense of presence or mindfulness. And there are 1,000 ways to do that. But it's where we put our attention that matters, not just what our intention is, but where we put our intention. And Foster and Hicks found that people that were happy tended to see the glass is neither half empty or half full. They were able to hold those things together and say, yes, it is both half empty and half full. Both things are true. And Dr. Rick Hansen, who's a Buddhist psychologist, talks a lot about how our brains are Velcro for the bad stuff and Teflon for the good stuff. So they've managed to balance that out. You don't want to dismiss the bad or the trouble or what you can do to work towards making a change, but you don't want to marinate in it either. You know, when they showed the World Trade Towers over and over and over going down, it overemphasized the bad. So you want to savor the moment. And Dr. Hansen found that if you saw something that brought you joy, just take 15 to 20 seconds and really let it sink in. I have a friend who has what she calls the nervous daffodil that volunteered between the crack in her driveway and the sidewalk. And so she sits on her front porch every morning and just looks at her daffodil and enjoys it. So, you know, that phrase, stop and smell the roses, I mean, it's really accurate. So things you can do, one thing is make some kind of mindfulness activity, a daily activity. But you want to leave yourself a back door. You don't want to make it a should. So, okay, I've decided to be mindful. I'm going to use meditation. That works for me. Studies show that between 12 and 20 minutes of meditation daily will increase your brain size. But maybe I get up and my kid jumped off the bunk and broke his arm and I had to get into the ER and then I had to get into school and then I had to go to work and I'm behind at work and anyway, the day gets away from me and my 12 to 20 minutes of meditation is out the door. Promise yourself that you're just going to do some meditation that day. Make it a minute. Don't make it this big should that is hard to do. Just then before you go to bed, you say, okay, I'm just going to take a minute and allow my mind to settle. And there's a big misconception about what meditation is. People think it's about clearing your mind. It's not so much clearing your mind, it's paying attention to your mind. So if you're paying attention, your mind is jumping all over, it's doing that all day. And so you have successfully meditated because you've noticed that your mind is jumping all over. So that's a successful meditation. Meditation doesn't work for everyone. People don't really care for it, but there's other ways you can be mindful. You can go through the day practicing doing things with your non-dominant hand. The idea is that it's not a habit, so you have to think about it. You have to pay attention. You can, if you are more ADD prone and you always need movement, you could do a walking meditation. How is my heel striking the ground, feeling your foot as it rolls through the step? Some people will put a dot on their hand. And then whenever they happen to notice the dot during the day, they'll go, okay, I'm just gonna stop just for 30 seconds. I'm gonna feel what's going on in my body. You know, is my throat tense, am I relaxed? How am I in this moment? there was a physician I used to work with that would put a dot on his exam room doors. And so every time before he would go in to see a patient, because inevitably someone would try to stick 14 patients into a slot, right? He would see the dot, he would stop, he would take a breath in, hold it for a couple seconds, and then exhale just slightly longer than his inhale, and that stimulates your parasympathetic nervous system and calms you down. And then he would go in and he would find himself much more able to focus and be mindful of what was going on with the patient, and the day was much more successful. Some people set alarms on their phones at random times, and then when it goes off, they're like, oh, okay. And they just take it, look around at their environment, any tigers here? You know, no tigers, no immediate danger. That's one of the things that's really important to remind yourself of, is that we don't have tigers in our lives. We have angry bosses that aren't going to immediately kill us, but we go to that same place, you know. So what is real? Am I in danger right now? And then what am I feeling in my body? And there is some evidence showing that if you do grounding exercises, like walking on the earth barefoot, that is very soothing and calming and gets you in touch. The theory is that it's the electromagnetic waves. No one really knows how it works, but the point is that you're being mindful of how you're feeling when you're doing that. You can go for a hike, get in touch with nature, and just say, okay, my 5 senses, what am I feeling right now? The breeze on my cheek. I like to hike when I go back to California, which is where I'm headed right after this. And I love that smell of the bay trees and eucalyptus. There's a certain scent in the forest. So just noticing what's going on with your senses. The next shared trait that they had kind of found was a sense of community, staying engaged with others. And it's really helpful to remember that we all struggle and heal in community. We're all part of one in a sense, and not even just the human part. And Einstein even talked about the optical delusion of feeling that you're separate. We influence one another and we have our own unique part, but we're all a wave in this ocean of humanity. So we want to try to not limit ourselves to just caring about me, caring about my family, my town, my state. You want to try and enlarge your sense of community. And if you get the sense that, once again, this is similar to before, focusing only on the negative, there's something wrong with me that I need to fix, it's not going to be successful. You want to see that we're all together in this massive humanity, and it's not that there's something wrong with me. Something is sick in our environment, something is sick with us, and what can I do to change that? What can I do to take one little step to make it better? And they found that if you develop this compassion for all beings, it helps light up the centers for pleasure in the brain, actually. And part of developing compassion for the larger community is not to learn not to take things personally. I once took this class, and the woman was a new teacher. It was the first time she had teaching a class, and it was something about learning to parent my 13-year-old, which was very troubling at the time. And I had all these questions. It was an 8-hour long day class. And in the first half hour, I covered that poor woman relentlessly because I so wanted to know and I so wanted to understand. And after a half hour, she shook her finger at me and she said, I don't want you to hear from me for the rest of the class. And I started to cry because I thought, oh, if I'd known that, I would have saved them up for the most important ones. And she said, and it's not my fault that you're crying. And I thought, and I don't get that either. Cry on. But now, looking back, I see that it really wasn't about her and about her telling me I couldn't ask questions. What it really was about me and my need to find a way to take care of my son. And I realized I wasn't going to get it that day. That wasn't going to be the way I was going to get it. So it was about my need and not about her. It's other people are an influence, but they're not the cause. Tara Brach, who is another Buddhist psychologist, says that the sense of belonging is the bedrock to happiness. And she says that just one episode of being cherished can help rewire your brain and change it for the better. And I think most people now are aware that we found that our brains can still grow throughout our lifetime and the pathways can change. Definitely not the way it did when we were infants and toddlers, but there's still room for growth and change. And there's a Jesuit priest called Father Gregory Boyle who does work with gang members down in LA. And he also agrees with her that being cherished is one of the most important pieces. And he says it really has three parts: a sense of belonging, a sense of unshakable goodness, and a sense of knowing that you are cherished by others. And things that will help you get there are to give and receive empathy from others. And I have an empathy buddy that I talk to every week, and we take turns. Okay, what's going on in your life? And when I say empathy, it's not advice giving, it's not sympathy, it's being with the person and following them and what they're saying and giving them your full attention. That's the empathy that I'm talking about. And they found that when we do that and we're with the other person and we're attuned, that it's very close to the motor centers and they light up and it makes us want to act on that. And that's where the advice giving is so comes in. And you don't necessarily want to force it on someone. You might want to ask them, are you interested in this thing? But yeah, it motivates us to act and to do things for other people. Louise Hay of Hay House, I don't know if any of you are familiar with her, but she recommends mirror work. And when the first time I looked at this, I thought, this feels really weird and strange, and I don't like it, and I feel foolish. But I tried it, and I actually found that it helped. Just as receiving repetitive negative messages works over time, hers is to give yourself a repetitive, positive, cherishing message, which is you go to the mirror, you look yourself in the eye, and you say, I love you, Colleen. I really love you, or whatever your name is. And then she suggests anytime you pass a mirror throughout the day, you repeat it, and that the more repetitions you have. Some people just feel too weird about that and it doesn't work for them, so it's just a suggestion. Kind of a little shift on this is the other thing I do is loving kindness meditation. And what that is repeating a mantra, a series of statements, wishing yourself well. You can also do it for other people too, but this is about learning to cherish yourself first. So I will pick my own statements that work for me. And I happen to have 4. May I be happy. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I love and accept myself just as I am. And may I be healthy physically, mentally, and spiritually. And then I just repeat those over and over. And one of my teachers who teaches loving kindness meditation said she was on retreat, and that's what they did for the whole week, right? And she's like, this is just rote, I'm just doing this, it's not making a difference. And the day she was leaving, she dropped a glass and it broke all over the place. And at first she went back to her old regular habit. Oh, Sharon, you're such a klutz. And then she said, but I love you and may you be happy. And so it does have an influence over time. Another thing you can do is to savor the cherishing you experience by others. They found that if you have a hug and you hold it for 15 to 20 seconds, you get oxytocin release, you get your endorphin rush, you get dopamine and serotonin, the neurotransmitters that help with mood. The limitations of this are that sometimes you don't have, you're not a real comfortable hugger, or maybe you only feel doing that with your significant other or whatever. And the way I've gotten around it is that I have a thing for babies. So I worked with babies my 40-year nursing career. And on days that were stressful, like on my wedding day, everyone thought I was insane. But I went into the nursery unpaid and I held babies. And it calmed me and it made me feel better. So if you can't find an adult because adults have all this baggage, go grab a kid and hug it. Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a Vietnamese peace activist in Buddhist monk, had people come up to him once he got a little more famous and ask him if he would have hugs. He's like, we don't do that. But let me think about that. He said, okay, all right. You know, if we're gonna hug, I don't want to just hug. I want to do it mindfully. I want to pay attention to it. So he said, if you will agree to this, I will hug you. And so he would say, breathing in, I recognize I hold a dear one in my arms. Breathing out, I feel how precious their love is. And he would repeat that 3 times while we were hugging. So you could do Thich Nhat Hanh mindful hugging too. The priest I referred to, Father Gregory, has a bakery that, I believe it's a bakery that he runs called Homeboys, because in his parish, he found one of the things people really needed were jobs to support them. And so people getting out of prison, a lot of gang members would work there. And he had one kid who had just gotten out of prison after whatever, and came to Homeboys and was looking at all the people there that were working, and he said, Father, these are your children. Can I be your son? And Father Gregory could have gone the reassurance, of course, you know I love you. But he took it one step further. He said, imagine what a gift it would be to have a son like you. And in that moment, that young man felt supremely cherished. And he said he'd been waiting his whole life to hear that from his father. And he had never been able to get it from his father, but he got it from Father Gregory, and he turned his life around. And he stayed out of prison and became a contributing member of society. So just one moment of cherishing could do that. And part of that is when we were kids, if we had traumatic things happening to us, we couldn't always ask for help, but as adults, you can reach out to people and ask, and maybe the person doesn't have a capacity at that time, but there are billions of people on this planet and lots of people to ask. So don't be afraid to reach out and ask. There's a man called Luis Cozolino, and his premise is that it's not survival of the fittest, but survival of the nurtured. And he says that when we nurture one another, it allows us to collaborate and makes us whole. And that's what keeps us moving in the direction of decreasing violence and being able to make great advances like we have in some of these things. So giving to others is a sense of increasing community. And it also, when you're doing that, you're meeting people and then you develop relationships and it fosters your own well-being. What we want to be careful of is that we don't want to make it a tit for tat. I'm doing this for you, Kurt. You now owe me. We want to see it as the larger community. If there is one sick member of the community, I am to that degree sick, so I am helping them. And at times when I'm sick, then I am in a position of receiving for others. And you also don't want to forget what a gift it is you give to others by being on this team. I study nonviolent communication, and I'm trying to be certified as a trainer. So we have what they call these pods where we train and practice with one another. And I got in this one pod, and it was a high-tech pod, and I am not a high-tech person. Emily knows that. I'm always going to her for help. And they said, here's 3 ways you can contribute to this group. You can be the scribe or the note taker for the meeting. You can be the tech support, clearly out for me. And you can facilitate the class and do the teachings, but over Zoom. So it required all this ability to do breakout rooms and all this stuff that I didn't do. So I said, okay, I can scribe. And they're like, well, actually, the way you're going to do it is you're gonna go into Google Docs, you're gonna use our template, and you're gonna cut, you're gonna paste it. And you're gonna do it in real time while we're talking, like, I'm supposed to learn the tech and NVC, and it wasn't happening. And then I found someone who was, well, and so I asked her, I said, okay, I'll facilitate. And someone offered to help me, and they did it, and I did it, and it was great, and it worked out. And then 6 months went by, and I couldn't remember what they said, and I was too embarrassed to ask for help a second time. And one of the other people agreed to do the facilitation. And I was talking to him because he was a friend, and I said, you know, I feel like I'm not contributing to this group. I don't even want to attend because I'm so embarrassed. I'm not pulling my weight. And he goes, you know what I need more than a scribe or tech support or someone facilitating? He goes, I need an audience. I went, okay, so you're giving a gift, even if you don't realize it by accepting. The other thing we want to be careful of, and this was brought up by Father Gregory, was that you don't want to give from a place of superiority. They're their little one, I'm going to help you out. And I think sometimes we do that. I know sometimes I find myself doing that because it's like, oh, I don't have that problem. That means I'm safe from this. It's not going to happen to me. So it comes from a place of feeling safe, but it is not helpful to the other person. Then they feel othered and disconnected. Oh, I'm different from you. And what you want to foster is you want to foster sameness. And Father Gregory talked about, for him, you know, he hasn't had the experiences of the gang members at all. But he said, they so long for belonging. He said, and I have been left out of being picked for basketball. And so it's little and it's not exactly the same, but it fosters that connection. And when he had the competing gang members working in his bakery, he said, you know, they can be rivals and they have to agree to work with one another. And he had one guy who was working alongside this new guy, and he had a picture of the territory tattooed on his face that was in dispute between the two gangs. And they never talked to each other, and they worked together for a year, never said a word. And then one day he got the tattoo removed. It was all bumpy and red and swollen, and he came into work and he looked at the guy and he said, see this? Yeah, I got that taken off because of you. And that was all that was ever said. But just being in proximity with people that are different from us and getting to know them makes a difference in community. The next trait that they found was a sense of appreciation or gratitude. And Brother David Steindl-Rast says that the root of joy is gratefulness. It is not joy that makes us grateful. It is gratitude that makes us joyful. And Foster and Hicks found that appreciating the now through gratitude practices is really what fostered happiness and joy. So there are a myriad of ways that you can have gratitude practices. There are gratitude apps. There's one called Gratitap, where it just reminds you every day to do it. You can just every day think of one thing you're grateful for that happened that day and visualize it and replay it over in your mind. You can look for lessons in the pain and realize that what you have is enough. Yeah, maybe I didn't get my preferred food today, but you know what? Not hungry, you know. There's kind of the silver lining piece of it. What I found really useful when I do my gratitude work is adding that piece of how did I contribute to that? How did what I did matter? Maybe I grew the tomatoes in the backyard and that contributed to having food that day. Or maybe I worked and got money. I mean, there's a lot of ways that you contribute to it that you don't even realize. Some exercises can be, there's a journaling exercise where you speed write for 5 minutes, everything you feel grateful for. And, you know, it can be my earlobe doesn't hurt. It doesn't have to be a big thing. And it can be mixed with big things. And then you can sit down and look at that and say, okay, how did I contribute to it? Or how did someone else contribute to it? Is there someone specific I'd like to express appreciation to? You can you just pick one thing you're grateful for, list the facets of the things you love. Like, I'm grateful for my husband, supports me, he's good with the kids, doesn't pick his nose in church, whatever it is, you know. Or just look at different situations that happen throughout the day and think of what makes them okay. I broke up with my girlfriend today. It sucked, but you know what? When I find that girl, I'm no longer in a relationship. I'm free to pick and choose. So you kind of turn it around. The other trait they had was centrality, making sure that you are insisting that this is a joy and happiness are central to your life. That's what you're focused on. You don't want to delay your happiness. You know, I've heard so many people say, well, when the kids get out of the house, and I've said it myself, I'm going to. So you don't want to delay it. You want to take care of things right now that you can do. You don't want to live life by putting up with all these low level intolerances. If the lighting is poor, fix it. It's a little thing that you can do. If you bought this expensive chair, but it's killing your back, give it to someone who wants it and get a chair that, you know, helps you out. It's death by 1,000 cuts, you know. So take care of those little things. Identification and a sense of purpose, they found to be really global in these happy people. And Tagore says that purpose, meaning, and contribution lead to joy. And you don't want to make the mistake of mixing the loss of a strategy to fulfill your purpose, such as your work, with the loss of meaning in life. So you want to have an ongoing process of looking deeply into yourself and seeing what makes you happy. And not what you've been told by other people should make you happy. Well, if I get the big job or whatever, but what makes you happy? And the majority of people retire from work because they're not happy with it. So they're looking forward to the day they can leave. And I know a guy that worked with my husband, he was like, you know, I'm retired today, and a week later the man died. And I thought, what, how sad is that, you know? So you want to build a life you don't want to retire from. And I know when I was interviewing for jobs, they always ask you, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I hate that question. I hate it because for one, it limits your possibilities. There's stuff going on that I just don't know about yet. So I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years. But I found the answer to the question for me was not, I'm taking your place, I'm going to be the boss, or I'm going to, you know, go join the Peace Corps, whatever it was. It was, I don't know what it's going to be, but I know it's going to be something that involves being kind to other people and fostering that in myself, because that's my value and that's what's important to me. So you want to run every decision kind of past your values. And they don't have to be big overarching values like integrity or something like that. Those are important and it's good to have those. But maybe you really value humor. So you want to surround yourself with other people that also value humor and keep them in your inner circle. And it's not that you're pushing the people out and not caring about them and not loving them. You are. They're just not compatible with you. So you're not going to keep them close. What's the other thing? Recasting was the other trait that they found, and that's just reframing your experience. Noisy kids in the house, that means we got a household full of love, you know. The trick here is you don't want to make it something that's not true. If you hate having kids in your house, that's not going to work for you. So you want it to be true. There was one woman that I was on retreat with, and her husband would come in after work with his work boots on and leave black heel marks all over her kitchen floor. Drove her insane. She tried 1,000 different ways to ask him to take his shoes off and remember when he came home. It just didn't happen. And so one day she's scrubbing the heel marks off the floor and she thought, what in God's name would make this man not leave black heel marks on him? And it popped into her head that he would have to be dead. And she started to cry. She didn't want him to be dead. There was a lot of good things about him besides the heel marks. But after that, when she saw the heel marks, she was like, he's still alive and kicking, you know, so she reframed it, she recast it. The other thing is you want to enjoy the moment. So sometimes we do things that are stepping stones to things we want. Maybe we have to work at Wendy's to pay our tuition to get the degree that we want. But so when you go to Wendy's that day, you don't want to go here, I can't wait for this to be over, but rather, wow, I am making money today. I'm one step closer to getting that degree, you know? So just recast it. And options was the next trait. People saw the different options that they had and they kept them open and they kept them flexible. So if a treasure event is fallen through, what does that mean? What's gonna fill it? They got a habit of looking at it optimistically, much like the rats that were like wiggling with joy because it was unpredictable when they get the fruit. Oh, great, what game are we gonna do today? So you wanna get in the habit of, oh, great, oh, this didn't work, oh, I wonder what's gonna happen today. I'm laid off, must be a better job coming down the pipe. There was one woman who was talking about her startup business, and she'd gotten it to be $1 billion business, but she had this vision of where it was gonna go, and she really needed a big infusion of cash to do it, and she didn't have it. And she was in talks with a large corporation, and the talks weren't going well, and she was like, if I don't get this, it's gonna die, and people aren't gonna know about this thing that I'm offering. And they were like, well, you know, you could have 10%, but you can't have any control, you know, majority control. And she was, but at least it would be out there. And it ended up falling through, and she was devastated. She thought, that's it, that's the end. And a smaller company said, you know, hey, we can give you some money, maybe not quite that much, but we can keep it going. And we really see what your vision is, and you can have 51% control, and we can go forward from here. And she said it was the best thing that ever happened, because she would have given away the store to the larger corporation to make that work, because she was so desperate and couldn't see the possibilities. But instead, she became a billionaire with control and could lead the way to keep her product what she wanted it to be. Accountability was another thing, and that is to recognize that you have the choice to create the life that you want, and that you're refusing to blame anyone else for how it turns out. You're not going to blame others, because, well, first of all, it's like I said before, it's not that others don't influence you and have an impact, they do. But if you blame them, you're judging them as being wrong or whatever. And really what they're doing is they're trying to fulfill a need of theirs. It doesn't have anything to do with you. So once again, you don't want to take it personally. If you start to blame someone else, they're the one, they got me into that, it's only a short step to blaming yourself. You get in the habit of judging, and then you judge yourself, and we are so harsh with ourselves. And so you want to replace that with, okay, so this didn't happen, this isn't happening, what do I need? Looking for it from this person isn't working, where else can I get it? What other ways can I go about this? And there are situations in our lives where we have very little choice. I do a lot of prison ministry, and I don't know if any of you have heard of Jarvis Masters. He was I hope he's still on in death row in San Quentin. He's been there for decades trying to get out. But what he had done was he joined a gang to belong, and then he had to rob to be part of the gang, and he did, and he got caught, and he got sent to prison. So he had like a 1 or 2 year sentence for what he did. And when he was in prison, he was kind of a marshmallow. He didn't want people to know that because it wasn't a really safe thing to be in prison. And a guard was murdered. And he thought, well, I have all this overwhelming evidence I didn't do it, but I'm gonna say I did it so I get some street cred with these people in the prison. So he confessed, and then he thought, well, why don't we go to court? So he went to court, but it didn't matter. He confessed, and he could have blamed the system because the evidence really was overwhelming that he hadn't done it. But he was convicted and put on death row. And he thought, okay, what am I gonna do with this? And he said the first thing he thought was, I don't really want to ever kill anybody. I really, that's not where I want to go. And if I had gotten out in a year or two, likely I would have stayed with the gang, likely things would have escalated, and I might have gotten to a point where I did kill someone. So he recast it as a good thing. I'm in prison. Okay, so now I'm on death row though. What am I gonna do with it? What do I have? What are my resources? He said, I got lots of time, lots and lots of time to myself. So he took up Buddhism and meditating. And he got to be known as a compassionate person in the prison by the other inmates as well as the guards. And there was one particular guard that was being very abusive with all the inmates, and tensions were getting really high. He realized something was gonna happen, someone was gonna die. Either the guard or the guard was gonna react and kill inmates, but something bad was going down. And he said, you can't really just talk about light and love with the other inmates. They're not really up to that. They're not in a place for that. So he thought, what can I do? So he came up with this plan to have everyone have a bowel movement in their toilets, stuff the toilets, and simultaneously flush the toilets. So that all that literal crap flew out of all the cells and into the halls. And they did it on a day when it was a holiday weekend, when that guard was supposed to be leaving, so that he couldn't leave. And it relieved all the tension. The inmates felt like they had their say. And even though usually punishing people doesn't work to get them to change, apparently there was a change in the guard, and he was like, oh, yeah, this doesn't really end well for me either. And he kind of toned it down a bit. So he made a difference. He had a choice, even in the limited circumstances he had. The last trait that they found was truthfulness. Envisioning the world you want and letting go of what the world tells you you should do. And that can be just reframing things. And I do this a lot, and I catch myself and I correct myself now. I've gotten in that habit of correcting myself. I should go to the gym. Yeah. No, I don't have to go to the gym. I reframe it. I'm choosing to go to the gym because I'm choosing health for me. So I'm making it my choice, something I want to do. And it doesn't mean that you can't be willing to do something hard. It can be a hard thing. It's like, oh, this isn't going to be fun in the moment, but I really want to do it. If you do something, maybe someone says, you need to help your elderly mother, you should take care of her. And you're like, I really don't want to. We've had a troubled relationship. I find it triggering. If you force yourself to do it, there's going to be resentment. It's going to be felt. It's not going to end well. She's not going to be feel any more cared for. So it's not going to work out. So then you can look at other ways that you might want to do it. Well, she needs care. Can I find her companionship that you can, companion to be with her that you can get along with? Is there something else I can do differently? And maybe you do want to stop in, but you just have a time limit of what your resource at. So look at other ways of doing it. The other thing about being truthful is just being authentic about what is real for you. But you don't want to abuse it. You don't want to say, use it as an excuse to judge another person. Well, I think you're really irresponsible. That isn't a truth. That is an opinion. The truth is that the last 5 times I asked you if you would feed the dog and you said, yes, you did do it. That's the truth. And you can share that and say, that's having an impact on me. And you can make another request or find someone else to do it or whatever. But you don't want to use judgmental language. Some people get confused about, white lies. We all indulge in those. But what you can do is if you see someone wearing a dress and you think it looks hideous, and that person's like, what do you think of my new dress? You can still say your truth. You can say, you know what I like best about that dress? I like the smile it puts on your face. You know, you want to, you can find positive things to say without shooting people down. Someone maybe makes you apple pie for your birthday and you happen to hate apple pie. You can say, wow, what a lot of time it took for you to make this pie for me. I so appreciate all the energy you put into it. You know what? And then you make a little request. Because otherwise you're gonna get apple pie every year, right? You say, you know what I like even better than apple pie? If you're in a baking mood, would you make me a peach pie instead, or a cake, or whatever your truth might be? So there are ways to make a little request. And that gives us just 7 minutes for managing stress. So a lot of the things that we talked about are going through these things that help bring you joy, because that helps manage stress in the end. So we talked about those, cherishing, meditation, all those things. One of the little things I like to do is an exercise I call breath, body, and needs. When I'm stressed out and I don't know what to do, I pause and I take my deep breath to get in with my parasympathetic system. Calms me down. Then I scan my body. What am I feeling in my body? You know, what's going on? And then, okay, what am I needing in this moment? What is one thing I can do to take care of myself? And when you think of need, you don't want to confuse it with a strategy for getting your needs met. For instance, oh, I realize I'm really hungry and that's why I'm being short tempered and that's what's going on. So your need is for food. It doesn't have to be, I can't get to the grocery store at this moment. It can be, one of my favorite strategies as a poor grad student was to stop over at my mother's house at dinner time. Get invited to dinner because I didn't have money for food. So there's 1,000 ways you can get food. You can order a pizza out and have it delivered. You know. So you don't want to get locked into one way to get whatever it is, but you want to focus on that need. And Marshall Rosenberg, who developed nonviolent communication, identified 4 areas of need. Choicefulness, having choice, mattering, having meaning in life, and then your physical needs like, you know, food, shelter, things like that. So those are your overarching needs. When I listened to a majority of people, one of the main things that came up with managing stress was how important sleep was. And part of it is because when you sleep, that's when all the repair work happens. It gives your body a break. And good old US of A has found that one of the ways to torture people, one of the most extreme forms of torture, is to deprive them of that REM sleep, that deeper sleep. So sleep is just so important. So you want to turn off your phones and the blue lights and get them out of your room so that they don't wake you up. They found that human growth hormone, which among other things cleans out the plaques and tangles from the brain at night, it's only secreted between the hours of 8 p.m. and 2 a.m. that they found in studies. So if you're a person that doesn't go to bed till 2 a.m., you're missing out a whole lot of repair work on your body. So you want to try and get some hours in there when you're sleeping. The repair work that goes on in REM helps the prefrontal cortex and your emotional processing and all those parts of it. And that's what helps you stay in the thinking, your thinking mind, so you can be mindful and do those other activities. Exercise, we talked about that, particularly the complex movement. Healthy diet is huge. They said that 40% of the adult American diet is processed. And there's so many things in the processed food, emulsifiers and preservatives. And the emulsifiers are like a detergent, and it washes out all that good bacteria that influence your mood and help regulate that. So the more whole foods you can eat, the better. And even more frightening is that they said 67% of our children's diet is processed food. And when we eat sugar, we all know that it inflames the brain, and the food industry knows our weaknesses, and they market to us to say, you have a problem. We're like, oh, I have a problem. And then here's what we're going to do to solve it. Sugar inflames your brain. Well, how about all these substitutes? but the substitutes aren't really any better, it's just a pitch. Okay, getting off social media or severely limiting it, because what it fosters is comparison and dissatisfaction with your life. They had this little tiny Asian country called Bhutan, and it was rated the happiest place on earth, right? And then they got TV. And they're no longer the happiest country anymore, because they're like, oh, there's that available and I don't have it, and they do have it. So you really want to get on that. We talked about doing fun, all the fun things you love, and now you have a reason why it's good for you. So have fun, knit, garden, do art, yoga, whatever. Keep your news consumption down to like a weekly check-in. It's important to know what's going on, but don't marinate in that toxic stress. And try to limit it right before you go to bed, because if you go to bed with it, it's the last thing on your mind. If you're gonna indulge in, do it earlier in the day so that you can go to bed with your happy thoughts and not with your painful thoughts. Self-acceptance, talked about the marketers creating discontent. So whenever you can limit your access to ads, which frighteningly difficult to do that. They looked at Syrian refugees, and one of the things that they found about self-acceptance there was that when they explained to them that their responses to the trauma of the war and the dislocation and being in these refugee camps, hey, that's normal, that's your body adapting. They're like, oh, thank God, there's nothing wrong with me. And the people that could realize that in the studies were way more resilient in all their markers. So there's a thing called emotional freedom technique, which is tapping, and they don't really know how it works. But the theory is that it has to do with your energy body, and quantum science kind of supports that we're all made of energy, which is neither created nor destroyed, but becomes compressed into matter, and we have this illusion that we're solid, but we're really electrons with all these holes. So they think that might be how the tapping on the pressure points works. No one really knows, but studies have supported that it does help people with depression. And I put a little place where if you're interested in it, Dawson, DAWSON, gift, GIFT.com. He offers free EFT exercises and the how-tos there if it's something you're interested in. I know it's 10 o'clock. And I did give you a breath fast questions, but there's so much I wanted to share with you.
There was a study with hotel maids, and most of them didn't think much of their life, working hard, backbreaking, flipping mattresses, or doing all that stuff. But they talked to one of the, groups, the control group they left alone, and told them how all of the things they were doing were exercise, and how exercise was good for your body, and and remarkable difference in the two groups.
Yeah.
Just by having that perception that they're exercising and it's good for them.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. That's a good one. I hadn't heard that one. Anybody else have anything to share? How about folks on Zoom, Emily?
Penelope asked when it's going to be available on YouTube.
Wait,
Tuesday night.
oh my God, I'm gonna be available on YouTube. That's good.
It's gonna go viral.
Everybody go check out the social media.
I've had viruses before and it didn't end well, Jack.
Well, Colleen, thank you very much for leading us toward joy. And we can tell this is the last Sunday forum of the year because we're out of coffee.
Yeah.
So thank you for tolerating that. And on June 11th. July 11th, is that right? Thursday? We will have our annual taco bar and brainstorm, at which you can bring your ideas about what you would like to see and hear at Sunday Forum. And see if everyone agrees, and then we'll do it. So please join us then, and we'll look forward to seeing you.
I would like to thank our main organizer. It's been such a wonderful series of forums, one after the other, good speakers, relevant, interesting, and you get the credit, so thank you, Kevin.
Well, but it is the brainstorm group that makes it happen, because that's where the ideas come from, and so I thank all of you.
And we need the
So,
audience. We need the audience.
Very good.
Thank you.